Have you ever considered that a rapid military conquest could mask an impending strategic collapse? This document completely shifts the perspective on British urban counterinsurgency in Iraq. Welcome to Strategic Labs. Like and subscribe for more strategic insights.
Today, we're diving straight into an analytical deconstruction of the British military's experience in Basra. Specifically, we're looking at that crucial window from 2003 to 2007. We're going to expose the top 3 most disruptive points that triggered a complete strategic breakdown in an environment that, honestly, many initially thought was completely pacified.
We're going to break this down step by step. We'll start by looking at what we call the illusion of control, before digging into our 3 main disruptive points: intelligence, doctrine, and posture. And then we'll see exactly how all of this culminated in a fiercely contested urban battleground. Let's get into it. Right, so first up, we absolutely have to shatter this illusion that the initial capture of Basra in 2003 was some kind of definitive victory. It's a classic case of tactics versus reality.
Think about the stark contrast between these two operational phases. Back in 2003, it looked like a textbook stabilization operation, right? British forces rolled in with superior mobility, heavy armored firepower, and rapidly secured critical infrastructure. We're talking the airport, the Shatt al-Arab waterway, those vital southern oil facilities. They systematically dismantled pockets of Ba'athist loyalists. But here's the catch: that early conventional military dominance, it created this dangerous, false optimism. Command severely underestimated the massive power vacuums they were leaving behind. Fast forward to 2007, and the strategic reality is a completely different world. It was a fiercely contested urban space, totally fragmented control, and essentially de facto militia dominance. The assumption that just removing Saddam Hussein's centralized grip would naturally lead to order, that proved to be profoundly flawed.
Because just beneath the surface, Basra's social fabric was completely fracturing. It was splitting into competing factions. You had moderate politicians and business elites trying to establish some sort of control, but they were up against heavily armed Shiite militias and criminal networks who were just exploiting the chaos. And crucially, there were foreign-backed insurgents in the mix. This instability was heavily fueled by external forces, specifically Iran's Quds Force backing groups like the Badr Organization and Asaib al-Haq. So Basra wasn't just an occupied city anymore. It had morphed into this incredibly complex, multi-layered proxy battleground.
Which brings us directly to our first major disruptive point: intelligence. Or, more accurately, a massive cultural blind spot.
The key takeaway here is that you simply cannot replace human understanding with technological dominance. British command leaned incredibly heavily on top-down signals intelligence and advanced tech. Now that's great for conventional warfare, sure, but it left a glaring cultural chasm when it came to decoding the complex tribal loyalties and the sectarian nuances actually happening on the ground in Basra. They really struggled to unravel the intricate tapestry of intra-Shia rivalries and just how deeply embedded this insurgency actually was.
When you stack up the military's initial assumptions against the actual ground reality, the missteps become glaringly obvious. They applied these generic counterinsurgency frameworks, basically assuming broad local support and thinking that removing the old regime automatically equaled instant order. Because of that, the coalition totally missed that deep sectarian grievances and highly localized power relationships were the real engines driving the city. Lacking that nuanced cultural understanding, their attempts to co-opt local leaders or build police forces routinely fell apart. They ended up elevating actors who had absolutely zero local legitimacy. And by doing that, they alienated the exact community factions they desperately needed for human intelligence. Without local cooperation, they were basically operating in the dark against an enemy they couldn't even pin down.
Moving on to our second disruptive point: doctrine, specifically how it was unevenly applied.
You've probably heard this phrase before: clear, hold, and build. It's pretty much the gold standard counterinsurgency strategy. It's a systematic approach. First, you clear a neighborhood of insurgents using military force. Then, you hold that territory with garrisoned security forces so the insurgents can't just come back. Finally, you build political and economic infrastructure to win over the population. On paper, this doctrine is incredibly sound, but trying to execute it in the dense, sprawling, chaotic labyrinth of Basra, that exposed some severe operational vulnerabilities.
If we break the operation down into those 3 phases, you can see exactly where the wheels fell off. Step 1, clear, actually worked pretty well. British forces could systematically clear out neighborhoods using their armored firepower and highly disciplined infantry. But step 2, hold, complete failure.
Because of severe personnel shortages and overextended supply lines, they just did not have the troops to maintain a permanent, secure presence in every district they cleared. And because they couldn't hold the ground, Phase 3, build, severely lagged. You had a totally fluid security situation and really poor integration with civilian agencies tasked with governance. And look, it's pretty simple. You absolutely cannot rebuild a district if you can't secure it first.
Because they failed at the hold phase, the entire doctrine was applied incredibly unevenly. Think about it. The moment coalition troops cleared a sector and moved on to the next one, insurgents would just filter right back into those vacated neighborhoods with renewed vigor. The insurgents just repositioned. They operated through illicit networks, they used brutal intimidation tactics against the locals, and they totally exploited the failures of those hastily assembled local governments.
All right, let's look at our third and final disruptive point, posture. This is what we call the posture paradox.
Force posture is all about how you project power, right? Well, the British force posture in Basra was inherently compromised from the very start. They had troops dispersed widely across this massive, sprawling urban terrain, trying to manage checkpoints and guard critical infrastructure. But they completely lacked the sheer numbers needed to project any kind of overwhelming presence. And to make matters worse, British planners were under intense political pressure from back home to avoid escalation and keep casualties strictly limited. What does that mean on the ground? It means their posture became inherently reactive. Instead of dictating terms and shaping the operational environment, they were constantly on their back foot, just reacting to evolving hit-and-run tactics, highly complex ambushes, and improvised explosive devices.
So by the time we hit the year 2007, the situation on the ground had fundamentally and drastically shifted. All those compounding failures we just unpacked, the major intelligence blind spots, the completely uneven application of doctrine, and that reactive, dispersed force posture, they all combined to completely transform the reality of the occupation.
Which leads us directly to the ultimate strategic outcome. Basra had become a fiercely contested urban battleground.
If you map out the degradation of coalition authority over this period, it's a strikingly sharp downward trend. We kick off in 2003 with this rapid tactical conquest and a total illusion of control. But by 2004, those massive power vacuums become painfully obvious as the civil administration just fails to take root. By 2005, we're seeing full insurgent recalibration. The militias and foreign-backed proxies adapt to the British force posture, stepping up complex ambushes and intense psychological operations. And finally, by 2007, we're looking at a grinding, brutal, multi-year stalemate characterized by de facto militia dominion over huge swaths of the city. Basra went from being this theoretically pacified hub to a totally fragmented battleground, where control wasn't imposed, it was negotiated.
The ultimate analytical takeaway from the Basra phase is undeniable, really. Raw firepower is effectively neutralized in asymmetric, socially embedded conflicts unless you have a rock-solid, overarching political strategy. Military power alone, no matter how advanced or well-trained, simply cannot substitute for robust, culturally informed civil-military integration. If you do not intimately understand the human terrain you're operating in, your technological edge means absolutely nothing.
So we want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Can conventional military dominance ever truly secure a fractured urban environment? This is just a preview. For the full deep dive, check out our long-form explainer on the channel. See you in the next one.